London, 1816. This is a story about what happens when a woman survives the kind of rejection that leaves no bruises, only silence. About a marriage that looks perfect from the outside and feels like a locked room from the inside. About scandal whispered behind fans in a London ballroom, betrayal dressed as etiquette, and a love so unexpected it feels like redemption. But there's also a mystery, because someone powerful has been shaping Lady Eleanor Ashcombe's life from the shadows, and the truth is buried in a name no one dares to say aloud. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe realized the truth on an ordinary evening. She was married, and her husband had never loved her, not in 4 years, not in glances, not in touch, not in the quiet hours when love is supposed to exist. She stood in her bedroom, staring at the empty side of the bed, and understood, with a calm that frightened her, that politeness was not devotion and silence was not patience. She had mistaken endurance for hope and respect for affection. Everyone believed she was fortunate, a titled woman, a powerful husband, a life free of scandal. What no one saw was how rejection could exist without cruelty, how loneliness could wear the mask of marriage, how a woman could share a home with a man and still feel entirely alone. Tonight, Eleanor would attend another grand ball at her husband's side, smiling for a world that envied her. But inside, something had shifted, because once a woman recognizes the truth of her own neglect, she can no longer unsee it, and Eleanor was no longer willing to disappear quietly. The maid, Clara, hovered in the doorway with Eleanor's gloves folded over her arm. "Shall I fetch the pearl comb, my lady?" Eleanor looked at her own reflection. A duchess she was not, yet people watched her as if she might become one through proximity alone. The Ashcombe title carried weight, but it was her husband's power that drew attention like candlelight draws moths. "Yes," Eleanor said softly, "and the rosewater, the one that smells like memory." Clara's eyes softened with something like sympathy, quickly buried under training. "Of course." Eleanor did not cry. Not tonight. There had been too many nights for that. Instead, she reached into the drawer where she kept the letters she never sent, small, careful pages written in the language of a woman trying to earn love by being easier to love. She did not open them. She simply touched the ribbon that held them together, then closed the drawer as if sealing a chapter. A footman's knock sounded below. A second later, the house seemed to straighten itself in preparation. The Duke of Ashcombe had returned. Even the air felt different when he was near. Not warmer, never warmer, but sharper, as if the world became more precise, more controlled. Eleanor descended the staircase with the slow grace expected of her, the hem of her gown whispering over the steps. Pale blue silk tonight, stitched with silver that caught the light. She had chosen it because it made her look like calm, because calm was a kind of armor. He was in the entry hall, already dressed. Tall, immaculate dark hair, combed back with the severity of a man who made decisions that affected other men's lives. The Duke, Lucian Ashcombe, stood like a verdict. He turned as she approached. "You're late," he said. Eleanor's smile arrived on time, like a practiced servant. "I am precisely when I must be." A pause, a flicker in his gaze. More evaluation than emotion. "That gown is suitable." 4 years married, and the closest he came to intimacy was the word suitable. "Thank you," she replied, and almost laughed at the absurdity of being grateful for approval that was never affection. He offered his arm. Not because he wanted her, because London expected it. She took it. His sleeve was cool beneath her fingers, his posture rigid. No squeeze of reassurance, no subtle leaning toward her. They might have been strangers performing a scene. Outside, the carriage waited. Rain had dampened the street, and the lanterns turned the wet stones into a mirror. As they rode, the city rolled past, elegant townhouses, dark doorways, lamplight trembling on wrought iron. London always felt alive at night, busy, hungry, whispering. Eleanor stared out the window. Lucian read a folded paper in his gloved hand. A document, perhaps, a list of names, something more urgent than the wife beside him. She decided suddenly that she would no longer beg for his attention with silence. "Do you ever wonder," Eleanor said gently, "what people say when we leave a room?" Lucian didn't look up. "People always speak." "Yes, but about us." Now he lifted his eyes. "If you concern yourself with gossip, Eleanor, you'll spend your life chasing smoke." "And if I don't concern myself with anything," she answered, still polite, "I'll spend my life being swallowed by it." A beat. "I married you to protect you," he said, as if that ended the matter. Eleanor turned fully toward him. "From what?" He blinked once. "From the world." "The world still watches me," she said, quiet but firm. "It watches me more because of you." Lucian's jaw tightened. "You are safe," he said, and returned his gaze to the paper, dismissing the conversation like an inconvenient petition. Eleanor looked back out the window, the words "safe" and "alone" tangling like thorns. A spark of humor, bitter but real, rose in her. Safe, she thought, like a jewel in a locked box. The Ashcombe carriage arrived at the Montclair residence, one of those grand houses built for parties that lasted longer than marriages. Music spilled out as soon as the door opened, violins and laughter braided together. The footman helped Eleanor down. Lucian stepped out behind her, instantly surrounded by nods, bows, and subtle shifts of attention. Powerful men turned toward him as if pulled by gravity. Eleanor felt, as she often did, like the ribbon tied to a gift no one intended to open. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of candlelight. Women in bright gowns moved like painted birds. Men gathered in clusters, whispering behind gloved hands, making alliances between sips of champagne. "Your Grace." A woman's voice, smooth as polished stone. Lady Beatrice Wexley approached, an older duchess with eyes like winter. She was powerful in a way that did not require a title. She had influence, secrets, and a smile that always felt like a threat wrapped in velvet. "Duchess Wexley," Lucian said with perfect civility. Eleanor curtsied. "Your Grace." Beatrice's gaze lingered on Eleanor's face, then drifted to her throat, where a small sapphire pendant rested against her skin. "How lovely," Beatrice murmured. "You still wear it." Eleanor's fingers rose instinctively, touching the pendant. "It was a gift," Eleanor said. "A gift," Beatrice repeated, amused. "Yes, gifts can be so instructive." Lucian's voice sharpened just slightly. "We are here for Lord Montclair, Duchess." "Of course," Beatrice said. "How silly of me. I forget sometimes that you prefer your evenings like you prefer your life. Ordered." Her eyes flicked to Eleanor again. "Enjoy the dancing, my dear. It's the only time in London one may touch someone publicly without being accused of need." Eleanor held her smile. "How generous of society." Beatrice's lips curved. "Oh, my dear, society is generous only when it's bored." She drifted away, leaving behind a chill. Eleanor felt Lucian's attention on her, not warm but alert, as if he were watching for danger. "She enjoys provoking," he said. "She enjoys reminding," Eleanor replied. "Of what? I cannot tell." Lucian didn't answer. Then Lord Montclair arrived, all charm and spectacle, greeting guests with booming warmth. Eleanor listened politely, but her eyes kept being drawn, strangely, unwillingly, to the edges of the room, where servants moved and whispered. Something felt wrong tonight, not dramatic wrong, not a scandal unfolding in the center of the floor, wrong like a thread pulled in a tapestry. Eleanor stepped away from Lucian under the excuse of greeting acquaintances. She moved through clusters of guests, receiving compliments that felt like rehearsed lines, until she reached a quieter alcove near a corridor. That was when she heard it. 2 women speaking behind a curtain, their voices low and urgent. "She's here," one whispered. "Yes. The Duchess wants confirmation." Eleanor's heart stuttered. "The pendant," the first said. "She's wearing it again." The second voice, older, sharper, hissed, "Then it's true. Ashcombe never destroyed the evidence. He kept it close. He kept her close." Eleanor's fingers clutched the sapphire pendant. Her skin went cold. Evidence. Destroyed. Kept her close. She leaned closer without meaning to. Breath shallow, but the curtain shifted slightly and the women fell silent. Eleanor stepped back, just as a man rounded the corner. He was not dressed like a guest. His coat was plain but cut well. His eyes were too awake for a servant, and too cautious for a gentleman enjoying a ball. He looked straight at Eleanor. For one terrifying second, Eleanor understood. She had been seen. The man bowed, not deeply, not respectfully. It was a bow that said, "I know what you are." Then he spoke, low enough that only she could hear. "You should not be listening, Lady Ashcombe." Her pulse hammered. "Who are you?" His mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "Someone who knows why the Duke married you." Eleanor's throat tightened. "He married me because he had to," the man cut in. "Because there was a scandal and your name was the clean cloth used to wipe the blood away." Eleanor's vision blurred at the edges, as if the ballroom's candlelight suddenly became too bright. "What blood?" she whispered. The man's gaze dropped just briefly to the sapphire at her throat. "That," he said, "is not a love token." Eleanor swallowed. "Then what is it?" His voice softened, almost pitying. "A key." She stared at him, unable to move. "A key to what?" she demanded, finally finding the courage in her chest, the courage she had been saving for years. Before he could answer, a hand closed around Eleanor's wrist. Lucian. His grip was firm, controlled, not painful, but it was possession made polite. His eyes were on the man now, cold and lethal in their stillness. "Leave," Lucian said. The man hesitated, then bowed again, mockingly this time, and disappeared into the crowd. Eleanor turned to Lucian, shaking. "Did you hear what he said?" Lucian's face betrayed nothing. "You should not wander alone." "I asked you a question," Eleanor said, the words trembling with anger and fear. "Did you hear what he said about you? About why you married me?" Lucian's jaw flexed. He leaned closer, his voice a blade wrapped in silk. "Not here." Eleanor's laugh escaped, small, sharp, disbelieving. "Always not here. Not now, not ever." Lucian's eyes darkened. "Eleanor." "No," she whispered, and the rejection she had swallowed for 4 years rose like a tide. "You don't get to say my name as if it means something to you." For a moment, there was something in his gaze. Not tenderness, regret perhaps, or warning. He lowered his voice. "If you keep pushing, you will open doors you cannot close." Eleanor touched the sapphire pendant, her fingers shaking. "I think the door has been open for a long time. I just wasn't allowed to see it." Lucian's eyes flicked to the ballroom, scanning faces, calculating threats. "We are leaving." Eleanor didn't move. "Tell me the truth. Was I a cover? A shield? A clean name to hide your scandal?" The word scandal seemed to echo in the music. Lucian's grip tightened slightly. "You are my wife." That wasn't my question. A beat. Then he said very quietly, "Not tonight." Eleanor's stomach dropped with the certainty that the answer was worse than she imagined. Lucian guided her toward the exit, his hand still at her wrist, his posture unshaken. To the guests, it looked like a devoted husband ensuring his wife's comfort. Only Eleanor felt the truth. She was being removed like a fragile piece from a dangerous game board. As they passed the corridor, Eleanor glanced back. Lady Beatrice Wexley stood across the room, watching them with a satisfied smile, and in her hand, barely visible, was a folded paper marked with a wax seal. The seal bore an emblem Eleanor had seen only once before. on a letter that arrived the morning after her wedding, a letter Lucian had taken from her hands and never returned. Eleanor's breath caught, because she suddenly remembered something she had tried to forget. That letter had not been signed with a name. It had been signed with a single word, Ravensmere, and as Lucian pulled her into the carriage, his voice low and controlled, Eleanor realized the most frightening possibility of all. The Duke had not married her despite the danger. He had married her because of it. Narrator's note: if you've ever felt rejected in a way that looks fine to everyone else, silent, polite, invisible, tell me in the comments what hurt more for you, the coldness itself or the way people assumed you were lucky. The carriage door shut with a heavy finality. Inside the darkness, Eleanor faced the man who had been her husband for 4 years, and for the first time she saw fear beneath his composure. Lucian stared ahead as if bracing for impact. Then he spoke. "Eleanor," he said, voice rawer than she had ever heard it, "that pendant was never meant to be worn in public." Eleanor's fingers closed around the sapphire. "Why?" she whispered. Lucian's eyes met hers. "Because," he said, "someone will kill you for it." And outside, in the rain-washed street, another carriage turned the corner behind them. Quiet, patient, following. The carriage rocked gently as it cut through the narrow streets, lantern lights sliding across the windows like restless ghosts. Eleanor sat opposite her husband, her gloved hands folded too tightly in her lap, the sapphire pendant hidden now beneath layers of silk. Yet it burned against her skin as if it had a pulse of its own. "Someone will kill you for it." Lucian's words echoed in the small space, louder than the wheels on stone. Eleanor inhaled slowly. Panic would not serve her. It never had. "Then you should begin," she said quietly, "by telling me why." Lucian's jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked older than his years. Not tired, but burdened, as if he had been holding the weight of several lives on his shoulders. "I warned you," he said. "I warned you not to ask questions." "I have lived 4 years without answers," Eleanor replied. "You don't get to call that protection." The carriage lurched slightly as it turned. Lucian reached out instinctively, steadying her elbow. The touch was brief, reflexive, and startling. Eleanor looked at his hand on her arm. It was the first time he had touched her without ceremony in months. He withdrew immediately, as if burned. "I never meant for you to be afraid," he said. Her laugh was soft, almost gentle. "That may be the cruelest thing you've said tonight." Lucian leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Ravensmere is not a place," he said at last. "It is a family." Eleanor's breath caught. "A family. One that no longer exists. Officially." The word officially settled between them like ash. Eleanor's mind raced. "Then why does Lady Wexley have their seal? Why are people whispering when they see me? Why did that man know my name?" Lucian's eyes darkened. "Because the past has a way of refusing burial." The carriage slowed. Outside, the street was quieter now, less refined, shadows deeper. Eleanor glanced toward the window, unease tightening her chest. "We're not going home," she said. "No," Lucian answered. "We're being careful." Being careful would have meant telling me the truth before tonight. Lucian looked at her then, truly looked at her, not as a duchess in training, not as an ornament at his side, but as a woman standing at the edge of something dangerous. "You were chosen," he said slowly, "because you were untouched by scandal, because your family name was clean, because you were good." Eleanor stiffened. "I was chosen like one chooses a lock." "Yes," he admitted, "and I have paid for that choice every day since." The carriage came to a stop. Lucian opened the door before the footman could approach, scanning the street with practiced vigilance. He offered Eleanor his hand, not the formal crook of the arm, but a steady palm. She hesitated, then she placed her hand in his. The contact sent a strange shiver through her, not desire exactly, but awareness. as if her body remembered something her heart had been denied. They stepped into a modest townhouse Eleanor had never seen before. Inside, the air smelled faintly of ink and old wood. A fire crackled in the hearth. "This is a safe house," Lucian said. "Few know of it." "Fewer still know of me," Eleanor replied. "Yet here I am, hunted." Lucian turned to her, removing his gloves. "You are not hunted because you are weak." She lifted her chin. "Then why am I hunted?" "Because," he said, voice low, "you are the last living witness to a crime that could tear apart half of London's most powerful families." The words hit her like a physical blow. "I've never witnessed a crime," she whispered. Lucian crossed the room and poured himself a glass of brandy. He did not offer her one. "You were 6 years old," he said. "Your family hosted a winter gathering in Kent. Ravensmere attended." Eleanor's memories stirred. Snow, laughter, a woman with dark eyes who smelled of violets. "A fire broke out that night," Lucian continued. "Officially, it was an accident. Unofficially, it was murder." Eleanor's knees weakened. She sat. "And the pendant?" she asked. Lucian's gaze softened just slightly. "Belonged to the Ravensmere Duchess. She gave it to you. Told you to keep it safe." Eleanor closed her eyes. She remembered the woman kneeling before her, pressing the sapphire into her small palm. "Never let them take this," the woman had whispered. "It tells the truth." Eleanor's breath shuddered. "I forgot." Lucian crouched before her, their eyes level for the first time in years. "You didn't forget," he said gently. "You survived. Something shifted then. Subtle. Fragile." "You married me to keep me alive," Eleanor said. "Yes. And never told me because—" Lucian hesitated. "Because the closer I grew to you, the more danger you were in." Eleanor searched his face, looking for cruelty, for manipulation. She found only restraint, and something that looked uncomfortably like regret. "You could have trusted me," she said. Lucian's voice dropped. "If I had trusted myself, perhaps." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. Outside, a faint sound, a carriage slowing. Lucian stiffened. He stood, moving to the window. "They followed us," he muttered. Eleanor rose. "Who?" "The same people who sent that man at the ballroom." Lucian reached for a hidden drawer, withdrawing a small pistol. Eleanor stared. "You keep weapons hidden in townhouses now?" "A duke must be prepared for scandal," he said grimly. The front door rattled. A knock, polite, controlled. Lucian met Eleanor's eyes. "Whatever happens, you must trust me now." She stepped closer to him, close enough to feel his breath. "Trust," she said softly, "is built, not commanded." The knock came again. Lucian moved to the door. A familiar voice called out, amused. "Your Grace, Duchess, how rude of you to leave the ballroom without saying goodbye. Lady Beatrice Wexley." Lucian opened the door a fraction. Her eyes swept past him, locking instantly onto Eleanor. "There you are, my dear," Beatrice said sweetly. "I was so worried. London can be such a dangerous place, especially for women who wear the wrong jewels." Eleanor felt Lucian's presence beside her, solid, protective. "You should leave," Lucian said. Beatrice laughed lightly. "Oh, Lucian, we are far past leaving," her gaze sharpened. "The Duke of Ravensmere is dead. The Duchess is dead. The truth is inconvenient. And yet—" she tilted her head. "Here stands Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, alive, wearing the key." Eleanor stepped forward before Lucian could stop her. "If you want it," Eleanor said calmly, "you'll have to explain why it matters." Beatrice's smile widened. "Because, my dear," she said, "it proves that your husband is not the hero he pretends to be." Lucian went still. Eleanor turned to him slowly. "What does she mean?" Eleanor asked. Beatrice's eyes gleamed. "Ask him what he did the night Ravensmere burned." Lucian's silence was thunderous. Outside, footsteps approached, more than one. Beatrice stepped back, satisfied. Choose carefully, Eleanor. Love can be redemption or betrayal. She disappeared into the night. Lucian closed the door, locking it. Eleanor's voice trembled, not with fear but with something sharper. "What did you do, Lucian?" He turned to her, his composure finally cracked. "I saved you," he said hoarsely, "and condemned myself." The house creaked softly around them as voices murmured outside, and Eleanor realized the most dangerous truth of all. The man she had never loved her might have been loving her all along, in the only way he knew how. But love, she was learning, could still be built on secrets, and secrets always demand a price. The voices outside the townhouse faded into distance, but the tension inside thickened, pressing against Eleanor's chest like unseen hands. The fire crackled in the hearth, each pop sounding too loud, too final. Lucian stood near the door, his back rigid, as if bracing for a blow that had already landed years ago. Eleanor did not sit. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She walked toward him slowly, the way one approaches a truth that might shatter something forever. "You said you saved me," she said. "Now tell me the rest." Lucian closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the Duke of Ashcombe, the man London feared and respected, was gone. What remained was a man stripped of armor. "I was there the night Ravensmere burned," he said. Eleanor's breath caught. "You told me it was an accident. I told you what the world needed to believe." He crossed the room, stopping a careful distance from her, as if unsure whether he was allowed any closer. "The Ravensmere family was preparing to expose 3 men," Lucian continued. "Men with power. Men who would have lost everything if the truth came out." Eleanor's fingers curled into her skirts. "And you were one of them?" "No," he said sharply, then softer. "But I was close enough to be useful." The firelight cast shadows across his face, making him look carved from regret. "I was sent to negotiate," he went on, "to persuade them to remain silent. They refused." Eleanor swallowed. "So the house burned?" "Yes." The word fell like ash. "Did you light the fire?" she asked. Lucian met her gaze without flinching. "No." Relief surged through her, but it did not last. "Did you stop it?" His silence answered for him. Eleanor stepped back, one hand pressed to her mouth. "You let them die." Lucian's voice broke. "I was too late." The words sounded practiced, but the pain beneath them was raw. "I heard the screams," he said. "I broke in through the east wing. Smoke everywhere, chaos. I found you, alone, crying, clutching that pendant like it was your heart." Eleanor's knees weakened. She remembered heat, darkness, arms lifting her. "You were 6, Lucian whispered. "I carried you out myself." Her chest ached. "And the Ravensmere Duchess?" Lucian shook his head. "She stayed behind to buy time. She knew what would happen." Eleanor closed her eyes, the memory finally aligning with truth. "She gave me the pendant," Eleanor said, "because she knew." "Yes." Silence stretched, heavy but alive. "And the men responsible?" Eleanor asked. Lucian's mouth hardened. "They are still powerful. One of them sits in the House of Lords. Another commands half of London's trade. The third—" "Lady Beatrice Wexley," Eleanor said. Lucian did not deny it. "She was Ravensmere's closest ally," Eleanor continued, pieces snapping together, "until betrayal became more profitable." Lucian nodded. "She orchestrated the fire without touching a match." Eleanor's voice trembled, not with fear but fury. "And you married me to keep me quiet." "I married you to keep you alive," Lucian said, "and to keep the pendant close, hidden, by placing it around my neck." Lucian winced. "I underestimated you." For the first time that night, Eleanor almost smiled. "London has been underestimating me my entire life," she said. "You're simply late to the realization." Lucian studied her, really studied her, as if seeing her anew. "You're not frightened," he said. "I am," she admitted, "but I am also angry, and anger is clarifying." A knock sounded again, sharper this time. Lucian turned toward the sound. "They won't stop." Eleanor stepped beside him. "Then neither will I." He looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. "You don't understand what you're offering." "Oh, I do," she said calmly. "4 years of silence have trained me well." Another knock, louder. "Open the door, Your Grace," a man's voice called. "In the name of order." Lucian laughed once, bitter. "They always claim order." He turned to Eleanor. "If this becomes public, if Ravensmere's truth surfaces, your name will be dragged through every ballroom in London." Eleanor lifted her chin. "It already is. At least this time, it will be for something real." Lucian reached out, hesitated, then took her hand. The contact was different now. Not possession, not duty. Alliance. "I never wanted you to be brave," he said quietly. "I wanted you to be safe." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Women rarely get both." The door splintered under a sudden blow. Lucian pulled Eleanor behind him as the wood cracked, a shoulder forcing its way through. But before the intruders could enter, a sharp whistle cut through the street outside. A second later, chaos erupted. Shouts, footsteps, confusion. Lucian peered through the window. "They've been diverted," he muttered. "Clever." Eleanor frowned. "By whom?" A familiar voice answered from the shadows near the hearth. "By someone who dislikes unfinished stories." Eleanor spun. The man from the ballroom stepped into the light, removing his hat. "My name is Julian Hale," he said, "and I work for no one except the truth." Lucian stiffened. "You should not be here." Julian smiled. "And yet, here I am." He glanced at Eleanor. "Duchess, though perhaps not for long." Eleanor crossed her arms. "You enjoy being dramatic." Julian chuckled. "Only when lives are at stake." He grew serious. "Lady Beatrice believes you will break under pressure. She's wrong, but she will escalate." Lucian's voice was ice. "You led them here." "Yes," Julian admitted, "to see how you would respond." Eleanor stepped forward. "And?" Julian met her gaze, something like respect flickering there. "You didn't hide," he said. "You didn't faint. You didn't beg your husband to speak for you." Lucian glanced at Eleanor, something unreadable in his eyes. Julian continued, "Ravensmere's truth will surface soon, with or without you." Eleanor took a breath. "Then I choose with." Lucian turned sharply. "Eleanor, no!" she interrupted. "You have decided for me long enough." Julian smiled. "Good, because the next move requires a woman London underestimates." He nodded toward the pendant. "That sapphire contains proof, names, dates, correspondence. The Ravensmere Duchess was brilliant." Eleanor touched the stone. "How do we unlock it?" Julian's smile widened. "At the very place London watches most closely." Lucian frowned. "Where?" Julian's eyes gleamed. "The winter ball at Ashcombe House." Eleanor inhaled sharply. "You want to expose them? In a ballroom?" Julian shrugged. "Scandal requires an audience." Lucian turned to Eleanor, tension rippling through him. "If we do this, there is no turning back." Eleanor met his gaze, steady and fierce. "I stopped turning back the day I realized I had been surviving instead of living." Something in Lucian's expression shifted then, something warm and dangerous. "You have no idea," he said softly, "how extraordinary you are." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "You might have mentioned that before now." Despite everything, he smiled. "Just a little. Narrator's note. If you were Eleanor, would you risk your reputation to expose the truth, or would you choose safety and silence? Tell me in the comments. Your answer says more about courage than you might think." Outside, the street fell quiet again. Inside, plans were forming, bold, reckless, impossible plans. and Eleanor understood something she had never allowed herself to believe before. Rejection had hollowed her, but it had also made space for strength. And love, real love, was not about sheltering a woman from the fire. It was about standing beside her when she decided to walk back into the flames. The winter ball was approaching, and London was not ready for what Lady Eleanor Ashcombe was about to become. The next morning arrived with an indecent sense of normalcy. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Ashcombe House as if the world had not nearly collapsed the night before. London carriages rattled past, maids moved through corridors, and the city breathed on, utterly unconcerned with secrets, betrayal, or pendants that could ruin empires. Eleanor sat at her dressing table, staring at her reflection. She looked the same, and yet she was not. Behind her, Lucian stood near the window, arms crossed, posture rigid. He had not slept. Neither had she. "So," Eleanor said lightly, breaking the silence, "is this the part where you forbid me from leaving the house and hire twice as many guards?" Lucian turned. "I was thinking of locking you in the East Wing." She smiled faintly. "How romantic. Should I expect flowers with my imprisonment?" His mouth twitched despite himself. "You're enjoying this?" "No," she said calmly. "I'm reclaiming myself. There's a difference." Lucian studied her for a long moment, as if recalibrating everything he thought he knew. "You realize," he said, "that if this fails, London will destroy you." Eleanor rose, smoothing her robe. "London already tried. It simply didn't finish the job." He exhaled slowly. "You are impossible." She walked toward him, stopping just close enough to feel the warmth he pretended not to give off. "You married an impossible woman," she said gently. "You just forgot to notice." Their eyes locked, something unspoken flickering between them, not desire, not yet, recognition. A knock interrupted them. Julian Hale entered without waiting for permission, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "Good morning, Your Graces," he said cheerfully. "I see you survived the night." Lucian glared. "You enjoy appearing uninvited." Julian shrugged. "You enjoy control. We all have our vices." Eleanor folded her arms. "You said the winter ball would unlock the pendant." Julian nodded. "Because Lady Beatrice will be there." Lucian stiffened. "She always is." "And because," Julian continued, "Ravensmere documents were designed to reveal themselves only in the presence of their betrayer." Eleanor frowned. "That sounds theatrical." Julian smiled. "The Ravensmere Duchess adored theatre." Lucian's voice sharpened. "Explain." "The sapphire contains a hidden compartment," Julian said, "activated by pressure and heat. The ballroom, crowded, warm, alive, will do the trick, but only if Beatrice is close enough." Eleanor tilted her head. "So I must dance with her?" Julian laughed. "No, you must be seen, observed, envied." Lucian shook his head. "Absolutely not." Eleanor turned to him. "You brought me into this." "I brought you into safety," he said. "This is exposure." Eleanor stepped closer, her voice low but steady. "Lucian, if you keep trying to protect me from every shadow, you'll never let me stand in the light." Silence fell. Then Lucian did something unexpected. He nodded. "Very well," he said. "But if we do this, we do it properly." Julian raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." Lucian turned to Eleanor. "You will not attend as my quiet, obedient wife." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Then who?" Lucian met her gaze. "As a duchess in waiting." Julian whistled. "Bold." Lucian continued. "You will command the room. You will dance. You will speak. And you will make Beatrice Wexley wonder when she lost control of the narrative." Eleanor's lips curved. "You sound like you've been waiting to say that." Lucian's voice softened. "I have." For the first time in 4 years, Eleanor felt something warm bloom in her chest. Training began that afternoon. Not in etiquette. Eleanor already knew how to survive a ballroom. This was strategy. Julian coached her on political alliances, whispered feuds, and the unspoken language of power, which smiles were weapons, which compliments were traps. Lucian observed, correcting when needed. "No," he said once, stepping behind her as she practiced a curtsy. "Lower, slower, make them wait." Eleanor glanced back at him. "You enjoy this far too much." He leaned closer, his voice near her ear. "I enjoy watching you stop apologizing for existing." Her breath caught. Julian smirked. "Should I leave you two alone, or is this still professional?" Eleanor laughed despite herself. The sound surprised all of them. It had been a long time since laughter had lived comfortably in Ashcombe House. As evening fell, Eleanor stood before the mirror once more, this time in a gown Lucian had chosen, deep emerald silk, structured, powerful. "You're dressing me like a challenge," she observed. Lucian met her eyes in the mirror. "You are one." His fingers brushed her shoulder as he fastened a clasp, slow, careful, intimate in a way neither acknowledged. "For the record," Eleanor said softly, "if this ends in scandal—" "It will," he said. "I don't regret it." Lucian's reflection held hers. "Neither do I." The winter ball arrived with ruthless splendor. Ashcombe House glowed against the night sky, windows ablaze, carriages lining the drive. Music drifted into the cold air, elegant and expectant. When Eleanor descended the staircase on Lucian's arm, the room shifted, heads turned, whispers followed. She felt them, not as judgment, but as attention. Lady Beatrice Wexley stood near the centre of the ballroom, resplendent in silver, her smile sharp as ever, her eyes locked onto Eleanor. Surprise flickered, then calculation. Lucian leaned in. "Remember," he murmured, "you don't owe anyone softness." Eleanor smiled. "I never did." As they entered the ballroom, Eleanor felt the sapphire warm against her skin, pulse by pulse. Beatrice approached, fans parting like a tide. "My dear Lady Ashcombe," she purred, "how radiant! One might almost mistake you for a woman with nothing to lose." Eleanor met her gaze calmly. "Only women with nothing to lose tell the truth." Beatrice's smile faltered, just for a second. Lucian watched, impressed despite himself. The music swelled. The room closed in. And as Eleanor stepped forward into the dance, the sapphire clicked, soft, unmistakable against her skin. Something inside it shifted, unlocked, and far across the room, Julian Hale straightened sharply, because the Ravensmere truth had awakened, and it was ready to be seen. The moment the sapphire clicked open, Eleanor felt it. Not pain, not fear, clarity. It moved through her like a steadying hand at her back, as if every quiet endurance, every swallowed disappointment had been preparing her for this precise second. The music continued. The dancers turned. London laughed and watched itself sparkle. No one noticed the small shift in Lady Eleanor Ashcombe's posture, how she straightened not out of pride, but resolve. Lucian felt it before he saw it. He knew the difference between the Eleanor who survived and the Eleanor who decided. "Lucian," she said softly, her hand resting on his arm as they completed the turn of the dance. "The pendant." He nodded once, his expression unchanged for anyone watching. "I felt it warm." Across the ballroom, Julian Hale's gaze sharpened. He lifted his glass, then lowered it, a subtle signal. The proof was awake. Eleanor let Lucian guide her through the final notes of the dance, her movements graceful, her expression serene. Around them, admiration rippled. Women whispering behind fans, men recalculating. Lady Beatrice Wexley watched closely now, too closely. "Smile," Lucian murmured, his lips barely moving. "She's suspicious." Eleanor smiled. It was not the polite curve she had worn for years. It was the smile of a woman who knows something dangerous. The dance ended. Applause scattered politely through the room. Beatrice approached at once, her silver fan snapping open. "Exquisite," she said. "You dance as though you've been reborn, my dear." Eleanor inclined her head. "Rebirth is often misunderstood. It's not gentle." Beatrice's eyes flicked to Eleanor's neckline, to the sapphire. For the first time, something like unease crossed her face. "May I?" Beatrice asked, reaching out as if to admire the pendant. Eleanor stepped back, calm but unmistakable. "I would prefer you didn't." Lucian shifted subtly, placing himself half a step closer to Eleanor. Beatrice's smile tightened. "Forgive me, old habits." "Old habits," Eleanor echoed, pleasant and pointed. Julian appeared beside them as if summoned by the tension itself. "Duchess Wexley," he said with an easy bow. "You look unchanged." Beatrice's gaze cooled. "Mr. Hale, still alive, I see." "Regrettably for some," Julian replied. Beatrice's fan fluttered faster now. "Enjoy the ball," she said sharply, "while it lasts." She turned and glided away, but Eleanor saw it clearly. Beatrice was rattled. Lucian exhaled slowly. "She knows." "Yes," Eleanor said, "and she's afraid." Lucian studied her, something new in his eyes. "You're enjoying this." Eleanor met his gaze. "No, but I'm no longer afraid of it." Julian leaned closer. "We don't have much time. The compartment will open fully within the hour." "Where?" Eleanor asked. Julian nodded toward the gallery overlooking the ballroom. "Privacy without absence." Lucian stiffened. "I'll clear the path." "No," Eleanor said. "I'll go alone." Lucian frowned. "Absolutely not." She turned to him, her voice gentle but immovable. "If she follows me, not you. Let her think you're still the man pulling strings." Lucian searched her face. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. "Be careful," he said. Eleanor's lips curved faintly. "Always." She ascended the stairs at an unhurried pace, aware of eyes following her. The gallery was quieter. The music softened below. Portraits of Ashcombe ancestors lined the walls, men and women frozen in confidence and arrogance. She stopped near a tall window. Moments later, Beatrice arrived. "I wondered how long it would take," Beatrice said coolly. Eleanor didn't turn. "For what?" "For you to realize you are not merely a wife," Beatrice replied. "You are leverage." Eleanor faced her then. "I am truth." Beatrice laughed. "Truth is a luxury. Power decides what survives." Eleanor lifted the sapphire from beneath her gown. With a soft click, the stone shifted, revealing a thin fold of paper, miraculously preserved. Names, dates, seals. Eleanor's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "The Ravensmere Duchess trusted me with this." Beatrice's face drained of colour. "You don't understand what you're holding," she whispered. "I understand exactly," Eleanor said. "You betrayed them." Beatrice stepped closer, her composure cracking. "You think London will care about the past? They care about comfort, stability, not justice." Eleanor's gaze hardened. "They will care when they realize who built their comfort on murder." Beatrice's eyes flashed. "You will destroy yourself." Eleanor smiled softly. "I survived you. Destruction no longer frightens me." Footsteps echoed behind them. Lucian, Julian, and several guests who had grown curious enough to follow. The gallery filled. Lucian stopped beside Eleanor, his presence steady, unwavering. "What's this?" someone murmured. Beatrice turned sharply. "This is inappropriate." Eleanor lifted her voice, not loud but clear. "London," she said, "has long been entertained by scandal without truth. Tonight I offer both." A hush fell. Julian stepped forward, his tone professional. "These documents were written by the late Duchess of Ravensmere. They detail threats, bribes, and names many of you recognize." Gasps rippled. Beatrice backed away. "This is slander." Lucian spoke then, his voice carrying authority and something like release. "It is confession." All eyes turned to him. "I was there the night Ravensmere burned," Lucian continued. "I failed to stop it, and I have lived in penance since." Murmurs rose: shock, disbelief, fascination. Eleanor took his hand. Lucian glanced at her, startled. She squeezed his fingers once. "I married Eleanor Ashcombe to protect her," Lucian said. "But she no longer needs my protection." Eleanor stepped forward. "I was rejected," she said calmly. "Not loudly, not cruelly, quietly. In ways society finds acceptable." Several women shifted, recognition flickering across their faces. "I was told I was fortunate, that silence was safety, that endurance was virtue." Her gaze swept the room. "I was wrong." Silence held. "I choose truth," Eleanor said, "even if it costs me everything." Beatrice's voice broke. "You think this makes you powerful?" Eleanor met her eyes. "No, it makes me free." A beat, then applause. Slow at first, uncertain, then building, not thunderous. Respectful. Lucian felt something loosen in his chest, something he hadn't known he was holding. Julian exhaled. "It's done." Below, servants whispered. Guests clustered. The ballroom buzzed, not with gossip, but reckoning. Beatrice fled. Lucian turned to Eleanor. "You've just changed London." She shook her head. "No, I changed myself." Their eyes held. For the first time, there was no distance between them, only possibility. Narrator's note: have you ever been told to be grateful for something that was slowly breaking you? Tell me in the comments. What moment made you realize silence was no longer an option? Outside, the night pressed against Ashcombe House. Inside, Eleanor Ashcombe stood taller than she ever had, and London at last held its breath, wondering what would rise from the ashes next. The applause did not last long. London never claps for courage for very long. It prefers whispers. By the time the musicians resumed, the ballroom had transformed into something tighter, sharper. Conversations fractured into urgent knots. Smiles returned too quickly. Fans fluttered like shields. Scandal had been born. Eleanor felt it settle over the room like a change in weather. Lucian leaned toward her, his voice low. "We should leave. Now." "For once," Eleanor said, allowing herself the smallest hint of humor. "I agree with you." Julian appeared at her other side, already tugging on his gloves. "Congratulations. You've just ruined at least 3 powerful men's evenings, possibly their lives." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Is that meant to frighten me?" Julian smiled. "No, only to impress you." They moved through the crowd together, Lucian's hand firm at the small of Eleanor's back, not guiding her, but steadying her. The difference mattered. At the entrance, a woman Eleanor barely knew caught her sleeve. "My lady," she whispered, eyes shining. "Thank you." Eleanor stilled. "For what?" "For saying what we're not allowed to," the woman replied, then vanished back into the crowd before Eleanor could answer. Outside, the night air was cold and honest. The carriage door closed behind them with finality. For a moment no one spoke. Then Eleanor laughed. The sound startled even her. Lucian turned to her, incredulous. "Is this hysteria?" "No," she said, wiping her eyes. "It's relief. I believe I've been holding my breath for 4 years." Julian leaned back against the seat. "You should know, by morning the papers will be vicious." Eleanor shrugged. "They always are." Lucian studied her. "You're remarkably calm." She looked at him. "I spent years terrified of losing a life that wasn't truly mine. Now I have one worth defending." Julian nodded approvingly. "You'll do just fine." When the carriage stopped at Ashcombe House, Julian tipped his hat. "My work here is done, for now. London won't forget tonight." Eleanor met his gaze. "Neither will I." Julian smiled. "Good, because this is only the beginning." He disappeared into the fog. Inside the house, silence greeted them. No servants hovered, no expectations waited, just the echo of truth. Lucian removed his gloves slowly, carefully, as if shedding an old skin. "You understand," he said at last, "that everything has changed." Eleanor nodded. "Yes, and you may come to hate me," he added quietly, "when the consequences arrive." She studied him, really studied him. The rigid shoulders, the control worn like penance, the man who had loved her like a secret instead of a promise. "I don't hate you," she said. "I hate what we were forced to become." Lucian's voice was rough. "I should have told you." "Yes," she agreed. Then softer, "But you're telling me now." They stood there, facing one another without armor. Lucian took a step closer. "I never touched you because I feared crossing a line I didn't deserve." Eleanor's breath caught. "You were my husband." "On paper," he said, "not in spirit. I didn't want to claim what wasn't freely given." She looked up at him, heart pounding. "You never gave me the chance to choose." His jaw tightened. "I know." A pause. Then Eleanor did something unexpected. She reached for his hand. Just that. The contact was simple and devastating. Lucian froze, as if afraid to breathe. "I'm choosing now," she said. He searched her face, disbelief warring with hope. "Eleanor, this does not erase the past," she continued, "and it does not promise the future." His thumb brushed her knuckles, tentative. "But it allows for one." She smiled faintly. "Perhaps." Something fragile bloomed between them, new, untrained, honest. Then a sharp knock echoed through the house. They both stiffened. A servant entered, pale. "Your Grace, there is a gentleman below. He insists." Lucian straightened. "Name?" The servant swallowed. "He says he represents the crown." Eleanor's stomach dropped. Lucian met her eyes. "This is it." She lifted her chin. "Then we face it together." Downstairs, a man waited, well-dressed, official, expression unreadable. He bowed. "Duke Lady Ashcombe." Eleanor noted he did not call her Duchess. "I bring a summons," the man said, "by order of His Majesty." Lucian's voice was steady. "On what charge?" The man's gaze flicked to Eleanor just for a moment. "Conspiracy," he said, "and treason." Silence crashed down. Eleanor felt Lucian's hand tighten around hers. The man continued, "Lady Beatrice Wexley has made a formal accusation." Eleanor laughed softly, despite the fear curling in her chest. "Of course she has." Lucian stepped forward. "My wife will not go anywhere alone." The man hesitated. "That may be inconvenient." Eleanor squeezed Lucian's hand. "It will be necessary." The messenger nodded stiffly. "Prepare yourselves. You will be expected at court by morning." When he left, the house felt suddenly very large and very vulnerable. Lucian turned to Eleanor, guilt flooding his expression. "I dragged you into war." She shook her head. "No. You tried to keep me out of it." A pause. Then she added with the faintest smile, "You did a terrible job." Despite everything, he laughed, short, incredulous, real. "You're extraordinary," he said again. Eleanor looked at the staircase, the portraits, the future pressing in. "No," she said quietly. "I'm awake." Narrator's note. Have you ever discovered that telling the truth didn't bring peace, but brought strength instead? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Upstairs, Ashcombe House settled into uneasy rest. But beyond its walls, London sharpened its knives. Because when a woman stops accepting rejection as destiny, the world always pushes back. And the Crown was about to decide whether Eleanor Ashcombe was a threat or a force it could no longer control. Morning did not arrive gently. It arrived with bells, carriage wheels, and the heavy knowledge that once the Crown noticed you, there was no returning to anonymity. Eleanor stood at the tall window of Ashcombe House, watching the fog lift from the street like a curtain rising on a stage she had never auditioned for, but was about to command. Behind her, Lucian adjusted his cuffs with surgical precision. "You don't have to go," he said quietly. "I can appear alone." "Claim—" She turned. "No. One word. Absolute." Lucian studied her face, then nodded once. "Very well." She crossed the room and stopped in front of him. Up close, she saw the tension he tried to master. The man who had faced Parliament without blinking, now unsettled by the woman he stood beside. "You're afraid," she observed gently. "For you," he corrected. She smiled faintly. "That's new," he exhaled. "I've been afraid for years. I simply didn't know how to name it." A beat of silence settled between them, not awkward, not heavy, intimate. "Lucian," she said softly, "whatever happens today, do not speak for me." He frowned. "Eleanor—" "I know," she said, "but this is my truth. Let me carry it." He searched her face, then inclined his head. "I will stand beside you." She offered a small, irreverent smile. "How progressive of you." Despite himself, he laughed. The carriage ride to court felt longer than the night before. London was awake now, vendors calling, women walking with baskets, children darting between legs. Ordinary life continued, unaware that a quiet revolution was unfolding behind gilded doors. Eleanor watched the city with unexpected fondness. "I used to believe London hated me," she said. Lucian glanced at her. "And now I think London simply didn't see me." The palace loomed ahead, stone, guards, expectation. Inside, the corridors swallowed sound. Eleanor felt eyes on her, not curious, not cruel, measuring. They were led into a high-ceilinged chamber where officials gathered in careful clusters. At the far end sat the Crown's representative, Lord Chancellor Pembroke, thin, grey and famously unimpressed by emotion. Lady Beatrice Wexley stood to one side, immaculate and composed, as if she had not fled a ballroom in disgrace the night before. Her eyes met Eleanor's, cold, calculating. Lucian's hand hovered near Eleanor's, not touching but present. The Chancellor spoke. "Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, Duke Lucian Ashcombe, you stand accused of conspiracy and treason." Eleanor's pulse quickened, but her posture did not falter. "Lady Wexley," the Chancellor continued, "claims you have fabricated documents to destabilize the realm." Beatrice stepped forward. "I regret bringing this unpleasantness before the Crown," she said smoothly, "but some women mistake attention for power." Eleanor almost laughed. Instead, she spoke. "With respect," she said clearly, "I mistake silence for death." A ripple of reaction moved through the room. The Chancellor raised an eyebrow. "You may speak, Lady Ashcombe." Lucian stiffened, but said nothing. Eleanor took a breath. "I was a child when Ravensmere burned," she began. "I survived because someone carried me from the flames. But survival is not the same as safety." Beatrice scoffed. "Sentiment?" Eleanor turned to her. "You had your turn." Beatrice's lips pressed thin. Eleanor continued, her voice steady. "For years I was told I was fortunate, protected, blessed. Yet every protection required my silence." She lifted the sapphire pendant, letting it catch the light. "This contains names, dates, proof, written by a woman who knew she would die if she spoke aloud." The Chancellor leaned forward. "You have evidence?" Julian Hale stepped from the shadows. "Yes," he said pleasantly, "and corroboration." A murmur spread. Beatrice's composure cracked. "This man is a known provocateur." Julian bowed. "And you are a known liar." The Chancellor's gaze sharpened. "Order." Julian produced copies, carefully prepared. The room filled with the soft sounds of paper being passed, seals examined, breath held. Lucian watched Eleanor, not the room. She stood tall, hands relaxed, eyes clear, a woman who had decided not to shrink anymore. Beatrice took a step back. "This is absurd. You'll condemn respected figures over old ash." Eleanor met her gaze. "Ash fertilizes the ground. Something always grows. Silence. Then the Chancellor spoke slowly. Lady Wexley, these documents implicate you directly. Beatrice's voice trembled. They're forged. Julian smiled mildly. In 3 different inks, across 2 decades, verified by 4 hands. The Chancellor raised a hand. Enough, he turned to Eleanor. You understand what you risked by bringing this forward. Yes, Eleanor said. And why did you? He asked. You gain nothing. She smiled, small, honest. I gain myself. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, the Chancellor nodded. Truth is inconvenient, he said, but necessary. Beatrice's breath caught. You can't... Lady Beatrice Wexley, the Chancellor continued, you are remanded pending inquiry. Guards stepped forward. Beatrice's gaze snapped to Eleanor, burning. You think this ends here? Eleanor answered calmly. No, I think it begins. Beatrice was led away, her fury echoing down the corridor. The chamber exhaled. The Chancellor turned to Lucian. As for you, Duke, your failures are noted. Lucian inclined his head, as they should be. The Chancellor's gaze softened, just slightly. But your wife's courage weighs heavily. Lucian's breath caught. You are dismissed, the Chancellor said, for now. Outside the chamber, Eleanor's knees nearly gave way. Lucian caught her, not dramatically, just enough. You were magnificent, he said quietly. She laughed under her breath. I was terrified. Yes, he said, and you spoke anyway. They walked down the palace steps together, sunlight striking the stone. For the first time, Eleanor felt the world open, not welcoming, not kind, but possible. Lucian stopped beside the carriage. Eleanor, after today, you could leave. Take your freedom. She looked at him, really looked. And what would you do? She asked. I would deserve it, he said. She considered him for a long moment. Then she said lightly, You still owe me 4 years of honesty. His lips curved. I can start immediately. Good, she said, because I intend to be very difficult. He laughed, openly this time. As the carriage rolled away, Eleanor rested her head back, exhaustion and exhilaration mingling. She had stood before the crown. She had not disappeared. She had been seen. Narrator's note, if you were Eleanor, would you have spoken anyway, knowing the world might push back harder? Tell me in the comments. Courage often begins the moment we stop negotiating our worth. And somewhere in London, as whispers turned into reckoning, one truth settled in stone. A woman who survives rejection does not return smaller. She returns awake, and the world must adjust. The days after the court hearing passed with an unsettling quiet. No knocks at the door, no summons, no arrests. London did what it always did best. It pretended nothing had changed while rearranging itself behind closed doors. Ashcombe House became a place of waiting. Eleanor discovered that waiting felt different now. Before it had been passive, hope stretched thin, patience demanded as virtue. Now it was deliberate, watchful, charged. She spent her mornings walking the long gallery, reading letters that arrived sealed and cautious. Some were supportive, some were politely horrified, a few, unsigned, were furious. Lucian read none of them aloud. He watched Eleanor instead. You're quieter, he said one evening as they shared tea by the fire. I'm listening, she replied. To what? To myself. He nodded slowly, as if committing the answer to memory. The staff treated her differently now, not warmer, not colder, more careful, as if they sensed something irreversible had occurred. A woman had spoken publicly and survived. That changed the atmosphere of a house. One afternoon, Eleanor found Lucian in the study, sleeves rolled up, papers spread across the desk in chaotic rebellion against his usual order. You're working, she observed. He glanced up. I'm undoing. Undoing what? Decisions I made believing silence was mercy. She leaned against the doorframe. You'll exhaust yourself. Possibly, he said, but for once, it feels earned. She watched him for a moment, then smiled faintly. You know, if this is what honesty does to you, I may have to ration it. He snorted. You've already ruined me. They shared a look, wry, unguarded, comfortable. That realization startled them both. The tension that had defined their marriage was changing shape, not gone, but softer, less like a wall, more like a question. One evening, as rain traced slow patterns down the windows, Eleanor spoke what had been hovering between them for days. What happens now? Between us? Lucian set down his glass. What do you want to happen? She considered the question carefully. I don't want to pretend we can erase 4 years, she said, but I also don't want to live inside them forever. Lucian nodded. Nor do I. A pause. I don't know how to be your husband, he admitted. Not the way you deserved. Eleanor's voice was gentle. Then don't start there. He looked at her. Where should I start? She met his gaze. As a man who speaks the truth, even when it's inconvenient. His lips curved slightly. You set impossible standards. She shrugged. I married you. I've always had questionable judgment. Despite himself, he laughed. The sound lingered longer than either expected. That night, Eleanor dreamed of fire, not devouring but contained, a hearth, warmth without danger. She woke with the strange certainty that healing was not a single moment. It was a series of choices. Julian Hale returned a week later. He arrived unannounced as usual, carrying the faint smell of rain and irreverence. You're both still alive, he observed. Disappointing for some. Eleanor poured him tea. You'll have to forgive London. It does love its melodrama. Julian accepted the cup. It's regrouping, Lucian frowned. Meaning? Meaning Beatrice Wexley has allies, Julian said, and they are not pleased. Eleanor remained calm. They never are. Julian studied her with open curiosity. You're not what I expected. Eleanor smiled. Neither was my life. Julian sobered. There's something else. Lucian stiffened. Say it. Julian reached into his coat and produced a folded document. The Crown has made an offer. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. They usually call those ultimatums. Julian smiled thinly. This one's polite. Lucian took the paper, scanning it quickly. His expression shifted, surprise, calculation, disbelief. They want Eleanor to testify again, he said, publicly, before Parliament. Eleanor's pulse quickened. About Ravensmere? And about you, Julian added. A woman speaking of power, silence, and survival. Eleanor sat back slowly. They want to make me an example. Yes, Julian said. The question is whether that example empowers or warns. Lucian turned to Eleanor. You don't have to do this. She looked at him steadily. I know. Julian watched closely. But if you do, things will never be the same. Eleanor thought of the women who had whispered thanks, of the girl she had been, clutching a sapphire and surviving. I already changed things by refusing to be quiet, she said. This would simply make it official. Lucian's voice was low. It will put you in danger again. She reached for his hand without thinking. He did not hesitate this time. I won't disappear, she said, but I won't be alone either. Julian smiled, satisfied. I thought you'd say that. When he left, silence returned, but not emptiness. Lucian stood beside Eleanor, their joined hands resting on the table. You could walk away, he said softly. From all of it. From me. She looked at him. Is that what you want? No, he admitted. But I'd accept it. She considered him, the man who had loved her clumsily, dangerously, imperfectly. I'm not walking away, she said. I'm walking forward. He exhaled, something uncoiling in his chest. Together? She smiled. Let's see if you can keep up. His thumb brushed her knuckles, unconscious, tender. You're terrifying, he murmured. Good, she replied. I've been told that's useful. The night deepened outside Ashcombe House. London watched, waited, adjusted. And within those walls, something quieter and far more radical was taking shape. Not revenge, not redemption, but partnership. For the first time, Eleanor did not feel like a guest in her own life. She felt, steadily, undeniably, at home. Parliament smelled of ink, stone, and expectation. Eleanor felt it the moment she stepped inside, the weight of centuries pressing down, heavy with voices that had never learned how to listen to women unless they were whispering. Today, she would not whisper. Lucian walked beside her, close but not leading. That too was new. The Duke of Ashcombe, once the quiet architect of protection, now moved like a man learning when not to stand in front of the fire. You can still leave, he murmured as they paused before the great doors. Eleanor glanced at him, one eyebrow lifting. And miss all the excitement? His lips twitched. I'm serious. So am I, she said gently. I won't be brave later. I have to be brave now. He nodded, jaw set. Then I'm here. Inside, the chamber buzzed with restrained energy. Men in dark coats filled the benches, their expressions ranging from bored to hostile to calculatingly curious. Quills hovered, papers waited. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe took her place at the centre. Not behind Lucian, not behind Julian, in front of them, the murmurs grew. She felt eyes sweep over her, assessing, dismissing, intrigued. A woman in this space was novelty. A woman who had already embarrassed powerful people was threat. The speaker cleared his throat. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, you are called to testify. Eleanor inclined her head. I am present. Julian stood to one side, observant, still as a chess player who had already seen 3 moves ahead. Lucian remained behind her, a quiet constant at her back. Lady Ashcombe, the speaker continued, you have brought serious allegations concerning the Ravensmere fire, the conduct of certain members of the peerage, and— A pause, waited. The nature of silence imposed upon women within noble households. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Eleanor's pulse steadied. Yes, she said. I have. A man rose. Lord Harrowby, sharp-nosed, sharp-tongued, and famously allergic to disruption. You speak as though silence were a crime, he said. Yet discretion has long been the virtue of women of your station. Eleanor met his gaze. Discretion is chosen. Silence is enforced. There is a difference. A murmur. Another man stood. Are we to understand, Lady Ashcombe, that your marriage was a deception? Lucian stiffened. Eleanor did not look back at him. My marriage, she said, calm and clear, was an agreement shaped by fear. Mine was not consulted. The room shifted. Pens scratched faster. And yet, Lord Harrowby pressed, you benefited from that arrangement. Eleanor nodded once. I survived because of it. Survival is not benefit. It is the minimum. A beat. Then, unexpected laughter from somewhere in the chamber. Nervous, quickly stifled. The speaker raised a hand. Proceed. Eleanor took a breath. I was taught that endurance made me virtuous, she said. That rejection, when polite, was something to be grateful for. That loneliness, when respectable, did not count. She let the words settle. I learned otherwise, she continued. I learned that a woman can disappear without ever leaving the room. Silence followed. Real silence, the listening kind. From the side benches, a voice called, sharp and accusing. You accuse men who cannot defend themselves. Eleanor's eyes flicked to the speaker. The dead require no defense. They require truth. Lucian felt his chest tighten. He had faced Parliament before. He had never felt it tremble. Lady Ashcombe, the speaker said carefully, you are aware that your testimony places you in danger. Yes, Eleanor said. And you proceed regardless? She paused, just a fraction. Then, I have lived cautiously. It did not save me. A low murmur spread. Approval, disapproval, fear. The room could not decide what to do with her. Julian stepped forward, placing documents upon the table. For the record, corroborating evidence has been submitted. The speaker nodded. It will be examined. A man at the back rose, older, quieter. Lady Ashcombe, he said, voice steady, what do you seek from this body? Eleanor considered the question. Not vengeance, she said, and not absolution. She lifted her chin. Accountability and change. The word change landed like a challenge. When the session ended, the chamber erupted, not into applause but argument. Voices overlapped. Decisions would be made elsewhere, behind other doors. Eleanor stepped into the corridor, breath finally uncoiling. Lucian reached her side. You were extraordinary. She exhaled a laugh. I felt like I was walking into a storm. You were, he said, and you didn't run. Julian joined them, expression sober. You've set something in motion. Some will support you, others will retaliate. Eleanor nodded. They already are. As if summoned, a man approached, well-dressed, unfamiliar. He bowed just enough to be insulting. Lady Ashcombe, he said. A word. Lucian moved instinctively. She's finished for today. The man smiled thinly. This won't take long. Eleanor touched Lucian's arm. It's all right. She turned to the man. Speak. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You've embarrassed people who do not forget. Eleanor met his gaze, unblinking. Neither do I. He straightened. Withdraw. Issue a clarification. Return to domestic concerns. And this ends. And if I refuse? Eleanor asked. The man's smile faded. Then your husband's past will be revisited thoroughly. Lucian's blood ran cold. Eleanor did not look at him. She smiled. Soft, almost kind. You misunderstand me. The man frowned. Do I? Yes, Eleanor said. You think my fear lives behind me. She leaned in just enough for him to hear. It lives behind you now. The man stiffened, then retreated. Lucian stared at her. You shouldn't provoke them. She turned to him, eyes bright with something dangerous and alive. You taught me how to stand in rooms like that. You just never expected me to enjoy it. Despite himself, he smiled. That evening, Ashcombe House felt charged, alive with letters, visitors turned away, whispers creeping along the iron gates. Eleanor stood in the long gallery, staring at the portraits again. Do you think they'll change the law? She asked quietly. Lucian joined her. Not quickly. Do you think they'll try to break me? Yes, he said honestly. She nodded. Good. He blinked. Good. If they try, she said, it means they noticed. He watched her, heart aching with pride and fear. You're becoming something London doesn't know how to contain. She smiled at him, warm, intimate. And you? He took her hand, fully this time. I'm learning how to follow without controlling. Her thumb brushed his knuckles. That may be the bravest thing you've ever done. Night fell. Candles burned low. In the quiet, something shifted between them. Not explosive, not urgent. Earned. Lucian spoke softly. Eleanor, when this is over, whatever that looks like, what do you want? She considered him for a long moment. I want a marriage that is chosen every day, she said, not assumed. He nodded. Then let me choose you, out loud. Her breath caught. You may. He leaned in, slowly, carefully, giving her time to step away. She didn't. Their first kiss was not desperate. It was steady, a promise made without witnesses. When they parted, Eleanor rested her forehead against his. This doesn't make things simpler. No, he agreed, but it makes them honest. Outside, a carriage waited longer than it should have, wheels unmoving, lantern dimmed. From within, a figure watched Ashcombe House with patient intent. The cost of being seen had not finished collecting its due. Narrator's note: if speaking your truth threatened everything you built, would you still do it? Tell me in the comments. Courage often costs us comfort before it ever brings us peace. Inside Ashcombe House, Eleanor closed the curtains. She was no longer hiding. She was choosing when to be visible. And somewhere in London, plans were being drawn, because a woman who refuses to disappear is a problem power always tries to solve. The retaliation did not arrive with violence. It arrived with paperwork, summons, delays, committees formed and quietly dissolved. Rumours dressed as concern, invitations withdrawn with apologies so polite they almost felt kind. London tried once again to suffocate a woman without ever touching her. Eleanor noticed, and this time she did not mistake it for safety. Ashcombe House became a crossroads. Women arrived in the afternoons, wives, widows, daughters of men who would never let them speak in public. They came with questions, with stories folded tight in their chests, with eyes that searched Eleanor's face for proof that survival did not require disappearance. She gave them tea. She gave them honesty. She did not promise victory, she promised truth. Lucian watched it unfold with a mixture of awe and humility. The house he had once turned into a fortress had become something far more dangerous to old power, a gathering place. One evening, as the last guest departed and the lamps were lowered, Lucian found Eleanor in the library, standing before the fire. "You've started something," he said quietly. She smiled, tired but real. "I finished something." He stepped closer. "They're watching you more closely now." "I know. And if they move against you again," she turned to him, "then they'll have to do it in the open." He studied her. This woman who had entered his life as a solution and become a reckoning. "You don't need me anymore," he said softly. Eleanor approached him, placing her hands against his chest. Not possessive, not uncertain. "No," she said, "I no longer need protection. That's not the same as not wanting partnership." His breath caught. "I spent years thinking love meant shielding you," he admitted. "I was wrong." "Yes," she said gently, "but you're learning." A pause. Then Lucian did something that surprised them both. He knelt. Not dramatically, not publicly. Simply, honestly. "Eleanor Ashcombe," he said, voice steady but unguarded, "I choose you. Not because I must, not because it is strategic, but because I love the woman you have become, and the woman you always were." Her eyes filled, not with tears of grief, but recognition. She helped him stand. "I choose you too," she said, "not as my savior, not as my keeper, but as a man willing to walk beside me without asking me to be smaller." They kissed, not like a beginning, but like an agreement. Outside, London continued its quiet war. Some men fell from grace, others adapted. Laws shifted slowly, stubbornly, but they did shift. Lady Beatrice Wexley was never restored to power. The Ravensmere name was spoken again, not in whispers, but in record, and Lady Eleanor Ashcombe became something London could no longer define easily. She was still titled, still elegant, still dangerous, but she was no longer silent. Years later, when people spoke of that winter, they would argue about politics and scandal and reform. But the women remembered something else. They remembered the moment a woman stood in a room built to ignore her, and refused. Not loudly, not violently, but permanently. Rejection does not always arrive as cruelty. Sometimes it arrives dressed as politeness, silence, endurance. But when a woman realizes she has been surviving instead of living, something irreversible begins. Healing does not mean becoming softer. Redemption does not mean becoming quiet. Sometimes love is not the man who rescues you from the fire, but the one who learns how to stand beside you once you decide to walk back into the light. If this story moved you, if Eleanor's journey reflected something you've lived or something you're still finding the courage to face,